Good afternoon and welcome to a special presentation of the AppGeo webinar program titled Cowboy Boots, Coffee Shops, and Gravel Roads, Chasing the Dream of a Multipurpose Road Centerline File. What a title, right? And in this presentation, we brought together some great speakers from the AppGeo team, but even more importantly, our friends from the state of Arkansas to tell their story of coming together to work on a very interesting joint effort collaboratively. So, without further ado, I'd like to welcome you to today's presenters, starting with none other than our own Brian Coolidge. He is a senior project manager here at AppGeo. Lots of experience on the type of projects that we're going to be looking at today, and of course 20 plus years of experience in the geospatial field. And perhaps even more impressive is his almost 30 years now as a first responder, being a volunteer on-call firefighter, EMT, and assistant fire chief in his own town. That then brings us to Bill Johnson, hopefully not a stranger to many of you, but an excellent guy to have on today. He brings to the table over 36 years of geospatial experience and is formerly the GIO for the state of New York. He started his career in DOT, and then when he became GIO, he was also chasing this similar dream, so he knows firsthand the challenge that is being looked at today. That brings us to the ringleader of our group, in a way, Sharon Hawkins, the section head of GIS and mapping within the Arkansas DOT. She's the current chair of the GIS board for the state, and her team is responsible for ARNOLD, which is one of the main topics we're examining today. And outside of the DOT world, she's active in the GIS community nationally, including representing her state and organization as part of the GIST committee. And you'll learn a lot more about her as we go. But thank you, Sharon, for being here. And that brings us to, last but certainly not least, Jonathan. He is the Deputy Director for the Arkansas GIS Office, a graduate of the University of Arkansas Monticello and Colorado State with over 10 years of experience now in that office, currently serving as the Deputy Director for the agency. His experience is far-ranging from forestry to geospatial analysis. Really a great guy to have on our call today, and has some great stories for you all as well. Now, I'm going to be real brief here in talking about today's agenda because we have a lot to get through. But we're going to be looking at a variety of ways this challenge has been looked at. And Bill is going to start off with a quick crash course on the state. Then from there, Sharon and Jonathan are going to give you some background on the challenge and the context of both their organizations, as well as their experience traveling the state, going on tour, so to speak, on the Arnold Roadshow and working with the communities across the state. And from that, we're going to hear what they learned, how things have evolved, where they're headed, and Brian is going to help us out along the way with some of those interesting questions. And, perhaps most importantly, I'm glad to share with you this map of our attendees from across the nation. We have a really great representation of states on with us today. And what I think is also a record turnout from the state of Arkansas. You've come in great numbers to support the home team today, so thank you for being here. And I've been lucky enough to have visited the state several times myself now, coming from Boston, and I really can't wait to get back. It's a beautiful state, great people. And so with that, I'd like to hand it off to Bill to kind of get us rolling today and get you all introduced to Arkansas.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Aaron, and welcome everybody. Now, I grew up in the Northeast, and for most of my life didn't pay a whole lot of attention to Arkansas, but I have since corrected that deficit in my character and have been there several times in more recent years. And it is, as Aaron says, a beautiful, beautiful place. Just wanted to give a few little statistics here relevant to today's presentation, because I'm guessing that many of you from other parts of the country may not be totally familiar with Arkansas. So Arkansas is a kind of a mid-sized state, about 53,000 square miles. of area. I worked most of my career in the state of New York, and we're about 50,000 square miles, so Arkansas is a little bit bigger. Population of Arkansas actually is quite low, total of 3 million people, and they are scattered around in 75 counties. Now, in terms of roads, if we're talking about road centerline file here, they have 102,000 miles of road in the state of Arkansas, of which 16,400 are the ones that the DOT manages. Those are the state highways. And the rest, 87,600, are the local roads. And that's what makes this particularly challenging, because those are the roads that are maintained by those 75 counties. And pulling a statewide centerline file of all of it together means getting all 75 of those counties to work together. Interestingly, of those 87,600 miles of local roads, about 56,000 of them are gravel roads, unpaved roads. That's certainly much higher than the part of the country where I come from. Now, the team working on this is also interesting to talk about, because it's a very modest-sized team. At the Arkansas DOT, where Sharon works, they have one person out of the 21 people who are identified as GIS people in that agency. Only one of them is focused on the ARNOLD component, which is the gathering up of all these local roads for a federal submission. And then in Jonathan's team at the Arkansas GIS office, they have a total team of 8, 4 of which are focused on local data. But that local data is more than just road center lines. It includes boundaries, it includes addresses, and other features. So what we're talking about here is a large state, beautiful state, quite rural, and very low levels of resources. And one of the things I've admired about the Arkansas team for a number of years is that they have a great way of getting people to work together and cooperating, and they have to. With these kinds of numbers, the daunting area and mileage of roads and the small team focused on it, they have to work well together, and they do. And you're going to hear a lot about that today. And I think the last comment I want to make before hand it over to Brian is that one of the things that you're going to learn, I think, this afternoon is that part of what makes this work, a big part of what makes this work, is not the technical issues. It's the cooperation and getting those relationships, getting that trust built, because that's what makes the whole thing come together. And with that, I'm going to ask Brian to kick this off here and get our discussion going.
Great, thank you, Bill, and thanks to Sharon and Jonathan for joining us today. So let's get started. Let's really ask the big question here. So you go a lot of places, everybody, every department, every group tends to have their own authoritative data source that they consider it. Arkansas has this really big dream of merging all these data sets into one and really coming up with one true Arkansas definitive data or authoritative data source of road centerline data. Can you really let us know how you think you're going to make this into a reality?
So, Brian, I'll go ahead and take that one. So, as the DOT folks that are out there looking into this know, all DOTs got a memorandum in 2012 from FHWA that said, hey, all states must maintain all public roads in their linear referencing systems from now on. So that told us that it's not just about the highway system anymore or the federal aid system anymore. But Arkansas was super lucky because the state GIS office had already been working on the Arkansas Centerline file for 911 purposes since the early 2000s. So it was a no-brainer that when this memorandum came out that we needed to work with the state GIS office, work together as a partnership to accomplish this.
Well, thanks, Sharon. Jonathan, do you have anything you might want to add that into from your standpoint? Sharon's with the DOT. How about yourself from the Office of GIS?
Yeah, so sure. So our road centerline data set began as a statewide program or initiative actually in 2002. Time flies, almost 20 years ago now. And it was really this grassroots effort, that we worked with all these counties one-on-one. And the final road centerline data set was uploaded in 2010. So you can see this 8-year progression of building this data. And it was really a response to the local need particularly in 911, for a common and accurate road centerline data set. Even then, there was this notion of let's have one data set that we all share. And this was at these local levels and really used by these local governments. It was really cooperative, between our office and the counties, and where applicable, the municipalities. Originally 911, as I mentioned, was that focused driver in this. That was the business case. That's really where it stemmed from, and the reason they had to have it. These the folks in those local PSAPs, even going back to 20 years ago, had to have that data, and at the time, it just wasn't there. And then as we moved on through the years, this became more and more critical. And even now, which is something, and we'll talk about this a little bit later in more detail, but now we're really moving this state centerline data set into the next generation 911 world.
Jonathan, that actually brings up a really good point here. So as AppGeo has worked in other states, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, helping develop standards and everything for our NG 911, the one thing we found is that both of those states all had working groups that helped develop that standard. You guys have the same kind of thing going on, and who's part of those groups if you do?
Yeah, and of course, when it comes to from the standpoint of our standards, such as our road centerline standard, yes, those were worked on both by our state GIS board, and there were also more dedicated specific groups working on those back in the day when a statewide road centerline data set was quote unquote a new thing, and there was no standard. So but those standards have been in place now for a number of years, and so most of that work now, when we need to change those things and go through that process, that's primarily flowing through our state GIS board.
Excellent, great, thank you. So let's talk about your journey to a 911 standard. You guys had a road show, correct?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Sharon and I put a lot of miles on some vehicles back in those days, traveling to all 75 counties, many of those more than once. And that just had to do with the level of support, so to speak, that those particular county folks needed. And so
let me ask you,
go ahead,
Jonathan, how important was that to actually go out there and meet these folks on their turf, in their offices, and face to face?
That was probably one of the most critical pieces. In a lot of these types of things, if you want to apply the typical 80-20 rule, 20% of the effort's in the data. The rest of it is in the interactions with those local folks there. A lot of times I like to say, people don't care what you know until they know you care. And so there was a lot of time sitting there with these either local elected official or whoever it was in that county or city that was responsible for the data, and really getting one-on-one with them. And a lot of times you don't start the conversation with, hey, we need to put this into the road centerline data. You start those conversations talking about something totally different. You sort of meet them where they are. You have to find out who they are, what their issues are, and then become a problem solver for them. And once they see you as a real problem solver and a real help, and not, hey, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. Once they see that, then a lot of doors open up.
Oh, that's great. I really appreciate that perspective. I think that might be part of the real secret sauce that you guys in Arkansas have perfected over the years.
And we'd like to think so.
So let's talk about your approach here. I think you said it best. You want to be a problem solver, right? And not just someone that says, hey, we're here to help, and people don't have any confidence in that. Can you give us maybe a little bit more detail on how you went about that?
Yeah, so Jonathan, if you don't mind, I'll start this one first. So one of our big challenges on our road show and trying to convince everybody from local governments to MPOs to other state agencies that this was a great idea was explaining the difference between linear referencing and addressing. So most of the state, except for the DOT, had been living on addressing on the Centerline file for a long time. And we were trying to show them, this is how a transportation department uses an LRS, or a linear referencing system. And this is how maybe you as a local government could also tap into the power of linear referencing to maybe maintain where you might have jobs around the county, or different maintenance activities that are happening out there. And then another way that we did to convince everybody is to show them, here's the proof, here's what we had before the ARNOLD requirement came out. Here's what we've developed afterwards together as we were moving through the state, so they could see how this was working. For the really technical folks that were using this information, we were showing them how perfect the topology was across the state. And then, just that picture alone can show you that locating, any kind of events that are happening on the roadway can be located more accurately, because every single route is represented in ARNOLD.
Sharon, can you talk a little bit about how all those edit and improvements and shape corrections and all that was done? Who was the work divided among the locals and the DOT, or among the locals, the DOT, and the GIS office, or some other combination?
Yeah, so sometimes, right? Sometimes it's just simple. A road is just a road, and it goes straight, and that's how you draw it. But other times there are some issues to work out. And I have probably archived thousands of emails between this office and the state GIS office talking about how do we illustrate different patterns of roadways. So how do we illustrate a single carriageway going to a dual carriageway? What does that transition look like? How do we illustrate traffic circles? All kinds of information. So we kind of started making our own rule book as we went along with ARNOLD. And then we would share that out, for each other, and then down to the local government, so we could encourage that this is how things should be represented. And then each time a county was completed, then there would be a QA/QC process to make sure that all those rules were met.
Great. Thank you.
And Bill, one thing when Sharon was talking, made me think about, for its existence, I suppose, the DOT has used linear referencing in some form to do a lot of its, its construction management, as far as how and what portion of any state highway was, involved in a particular project or whatnot. Well, these counties essentially did the same thing from a conceptual standpoint, except that they might be doing this on the upper end of the technological spectrum with a spreadsheet. To the other end of that spectrum might just be, on a sheet of paper or something. But what we were able to demonstrate is we could take the information that Sharon's team was building in for the local roads, and now on a given county road, in the state Centerline data set, obviously, that's broken up, since it's primarily a geocoding data set, it's broken up at intersections. And here's these segments between the intersections. Well, on a county road that's being graded or paved or whatever, they're not necessarily going to do that work between two intersections. Maybe it's a mile between two intersections, and only the first half mile of that is getting some type of work. And we were able to demonstrate in a very, very visual sense how, quite literally, without a lot of effort, that they could actually build in new data to leverage the linear referencing system to show that, okay, this year we're going to pave this much of this county road. And if the particular county road was 10 miles long, or they're going to pave the first 6 3/4 or whatever. That's hard to do when you're only working with, standard, say, vector data set that's in segments. Almost impossible to do that. But with just a little bit of effort, they could turn their existing data into something that was a management tool. And it may be something that they had never used. And some of these counties, their spreadsheets were detailed enough that they said they had this this section of the road is paved beginning at mile 0 and 1.27. It was that detailed in those spreadsheets. So it was really not a heavy lift to go from what they already knew and understood into a much, larger and more versatile world of the, of the geospatial data.
Yeah, that's really important. I want to pause here just for a second, just to add some emphasis to that, because what you've done here is you've taken one set of geometry, the alignment of those roads that's all been corrected to a uniform standard. And the local version of that originally only had one of these referencing systems, address ranges on it, which is to meet a lot of those local requirements. And the DOT, which is the home of the linear referencing world, has added linear referencing, that the mileage-based references on top. So you've got one set of geometry with, I like to call them Velcro. You got two sets of Velcro that allow you to attach business data. One of those is using linear reference measures, and the other is using addresses. So it's a great multi-purpose, multi-use single centerline file. So this is that dream we talk about chasing, to be able to meet diverse use cases with a single data set. So bravo. All right, I think maybe Jonathan, what might be interesting at this point is to talk about what has to happen to this now to make it ready for the next generation 911 world. I know you hinted at that earlier, that's where you're moving. Let's talk about that.
Obviously, like so many other states, that's the path we're on, and that's it comes as no surprise to anyone. We've had for a number of years now, as I mentioned, our publication standard. You go to our website, download the data, statewide in that one standard. However, it's started out its life as an FGDC based type standard, but within the next gen 911 world, when we're operating on those NENA standards, those support very specific use cases, very specific applications, and we know where we know where we are, we know where we've got to be, and one of the things we're working on now is how we what's the best method to translate that data, but we also know that now we have to do some more of that work where we go sit down one-on-one with these local data editors and explain to them that geocoding, that process can be fairly forgiving in a live next gen 911 sense that's involving 911 call taking and dispatching and emergency response. Those systems aren't very forgiving, or may not be, and so there's still a lot of work to be done, building in some of those things that are required, and we're obviously learning as we go in a lot of respects. We're relying heavily on our our counterpart states who have been there and done that to mine their knowledge and say, okay, here's where we are right now. When you were at this place, what were you doing and how did you handle A, B, and C? We know there's not a need to invent that wheel. We just need to go kind of copy the wheel from someone else. Obviously all our state counterparts are more than willing to help out in that.
Yeah, let me ask Sharon here at this point. So, the ARNOLD, the focus on meeting that requirement that Federal Highways issued in 2014, put you in the driver's seat to get that all together and create the linear referencing as required. And now, as the thing is moving more toward next gen 911, what is the DOT's level of participation, and what's your role going forward into that space?
And it's a good question, Bill. So our absolute role all the time, never failing, is to make sure that the state GIS office is aware when the state highway system changes and how it changed. That's by sending them a minute order. That's by sending them the geometry of the route, if there was a new route or a realigned route. And that's by letting them know immediately if a route was dropped from the state highway system and became a local road. So that's probably our biggest part that we play now. But as you guys mentioned at the very beginning, we do have just one main ARNOLD editor here at the department. So we do have to sacrifice some things. We can't keep up with the local road, on a live basis by any means. We can keep up with those by county, depending on how often the county updates their information, on a yearly basis, on an annual basis. Sometimes if it's a very rural county, maybe every 2-year basis that we're pulling in those new local roads. So state highway system is still what we concentrate on, making sure that's always up to date, pushing out those changes to the state GIS office, to Jonathan's office. And then, of course, we're willing to listen. We're willing to participate and help out however we can, if, as we're approached, as we learn more about Next Gen 911.
Yeah, great.
I was going to say, Bill, this goes back to your Velcro reference.
Mm-hmm.
Sharon, help me out here. I'm thinking in a previous conversation or presentation or something, you used the analogy of a Christmas tree, I think. And this vector data that we're talking about, this linear referencing enabled road centerline data set, that's the Christmas tree. And you can hang whatever ornament you want on the Christmas tree. Over here, we're going to hang dynamic segmentation to support, pavement management. Over here, we're going to hang geocoding. Over here, we're going to hang something else. Well, the new ornament, it just happens to be about a 5-pound ornament, is Next Generation 911. And it's and this one, obviously we get to that sort of through a translation that's going to have to occur. But it's again just one of those things that we hang on or hang on to the central structure of this thing.
Yeah,
use the Christmas tree reference, or
that's great. I haven't heard you use that one before. That's good. I will be borrowing that, I think. Before we move on, I know Brian, as a first responder in his town, they have an interstate highway goes through there, and I know that the linear referencing has turned out to be a useful element in the way the 911 calls get conveyed to the fire department. Brian, you want to explain how that is helpful to you?
Well, thanks, Bill. Yeah, I would say it's helpful to us, although we got to get used to it. So here in Massachusetts, where I'm located, we always had interstate highways that had exit numbers that were assigned based on incremental number. However, just recently, we've gone to the milepost, and Mass Highway has since moved that all over to our standards. So now we have exit numbers that we're not familiar with. However, it'll make it much easier once we get familiar with those new exit numbers and what those mileage markers are, exactly where along the highway any of those incidences could be. Prior to that, it was north of this exit or south of this exit. Going forward in the future, if we actually have a milepost number, we know what that exit number is based on its mileage, it'll help us determine that. I think much easier. It's just going to be a question of getting used to it.
Great. Thank you for that. All right. I think what we'd like to do, we've talked a lot about, how you got to this point with this consolidated road centerline file. I think it would be really interesting to hear about what are the lessons learned. You've been at this a long time, so let's talk about what have you learned? Maybe you want to start that off, Sharon?
Sure. So first lesson for me that I had to admit to myself that I learned probably a couple of years ago now is that we weren't going to be able to carry this forward as we dreamed about in the very beginning. As in, the ARNOLD that we have here at the department and the state centerline file at the GIS office for the state, those are a little different. They're not the exact same file at all times. We have our priorities here at the department, and then they have their own on their end. But the dream of the communication between the two offices, constant communication, the set of rules that we had as far as making sure that we know when changes have happened. That is still alive and well and will continue to be. But that one single source Centerline file, there is a single source for the department, for the GIS office. We certainly still communicate with each other, but it's just not exactly how we wanted it to be in the very beginning.
Interesting. Jonathan, what about you? What are some of the things you've learned along the way here?
Yeah, well, as we were going through this process a few years ago, like I mentioned, we had to spend a lot of time interfacing with those local data editors. And one of the things we were doing is we said, okay, we're going to take your data, we're going to add these fields to it. Because in the process of the whole project, we added some fields. I added and populated some data fields, and then the DOT added and populated some data fields. And so working with those local editors, we had to sort of introduce them to these new data fields, explain what they were, why they were important, and then once we were done, give them back to the local editors and rely on them to keep them up to date. That's not always been the easiest thing to do for a number of reasons. A lot of times the local data editor has 5 or 6 other sets of responsibilities, maintaining GIS data just being one of them. And they typically, GIS and mapping is the thing they have the least knowledge and or training in of the various things they're doing. And then also, one thing that tends to be a reality at these local levels is turnover. A lot of times when as you can imagine, someone gets a marketable skill, and they're in a job that maybe doesn't pay all that well, they're on the hunt. Now they've got a marketable skill and they're taking their talent somewhere else. And so time and time again, we're going back out to that county and reestablishing that rapport and that relationship with a new person. A lot of times we're lucky enough that it's not a brand new person. It's just someone that's sort of got moved around. Maybe someone we already know, have done some work with, but we're in sort of this new capacity. Hey, and just to be quite honest, doing a lot of this, getting all those ducks in a row and herding all those cats, it ain't easy. There's a lot that goes into that.
Yeah.
There's the herding of the cats.
That's
the
beautiful. I love that.
Yeah. This and really, breaking down, I guess you could say, breaking down old habits and old assumptions. It's probably a good time to tell one story. And this just happened to be the county that I'm from originally. It was this sort of thing there. You see in the picture there, it's hard to teach old dogs new tricks. And we had a lot of old dogs in this process that we had to talk to. So, what we did is we kind of went old school, printed out a big paper map, took that to the county and said, okay, we need to know, we know where the state highways are. We can guarantee, we can confirm where those are. What we don't know, and we know where the county roads are for the most part, but we don't know where they all are. And we certainly don't know which county roads are paved or gravel. And so we rolled out these large E-size maps in front of the county folks and took out markers and pencils and drew all over these maps and marked on them and said, okay, the pavement stops right here. And this one's has no pavement. No, this is not really a county road anyway. It's a private road. And that was the other thing. And, from a 911 sense, you have, in a lot of our counties, you have named roads that are both that, here's a named road that's a county road, publicly maintained. Here's a named road that's a private road. It has a name for 911 purposes, just so they can be located. So, I sat down with this county and I said, okay, let's figure out where all your roads are. We did that. And I said, just off the top of your head, how many miles of county road do you think you have? And he said, oh, we've got about 600 miles of county road. So based on his annotations on the map, we took that map back, coded everything, summarized everything, 400 miles of county roads. 600, 400. It's a big difference in a county that has a population of less than 10,000. And so I went back to this county and I said, hey, I only found 400 miles of county roads. And he said, well, that can't be right. I said, well, let's look at it again. We looked at it again. We found less than 10 miles of additional road that we had somehow missed the first time. I said, okay, that's it. We can't make up roads as we go. And so I said, where'd you get that 600-mile figure for your number of miles of county roads? He said, well, I got it from the last county judge. And in Arkansas, the county judge, it's a little bit of a misleading title, but the county judge is the highest elected official in the county. So I said, okay, well, being from there, I happen to know the last county judge. I went to him. I said, where'd you get that 600 miles of county road? He said, well, I got it from the last county judge. So you've got this undocumented road mileage that's just being passed from person to person, from elected official to elected official. And no one had ever sat down and verified that until we did this project. And so that really happened in way more counties than you might think, and maybe you do think. But it also, in some of our meetings, we told that same story. And it spurred some of the other county officials to take a good hard look at their roads and really refine those. And, more times than not, the total number of county roads decreased from what they thought they had. So it was quite an eye-opening experience for us and for a lot of the local folks.
Yeah, that's very interesting, Jonathan. I could tell you a similar story in New York that's not quite as good as that, but we had when I was at the DOT a local highway inventory file, because the way the federal aid funding formula worked in New York was it was based on road mileage. The dollars that a community got was based on how many miles of road. And so each town and city in the state every year had to certify an inventory. This is how many miles we have, and that's how they got their check. And when we finally took that inventory, it was just a flat database. When we finally attached it to our GIS data, this is 20 some years ago, what we found is in many hundreds and actually thousands of cases, any road that was along a boundary between two towns or two cities was claimed by both. And so it was amazing once we eliminated all the duplicates, how everybody's mileage was reduced. And you can imagine, the reaction to that from local officials who realized that they were going to get less money once we had eliminated all the duplicates. So
we had some of those same types of things, or some of those same types of questions that were asked.
Yeah,
when we did this.
So I think we've got a few minutes left. Let's just talk at the end here about, where do you go from here? Like, what's next for you folks in Arkansas, and what are you shooting for now? What's your next goal?
Sharon, you want to jump into that one?
Yeah. I just wanted to say, I wanted to brag on ARDOT real quick to say that, with ARNOLD being the authoritative source, everybody here at the department that owns data has taken that to heart. Bridge inventory, roadway inventory, anything HPMS, our job status, our pavement information, everything lives on ARNOLD here. Everybody is using ARNOLD, the ARNOLD, the live data set ARNOLD that we have here, which we're super proud of. I'm so glad that it's worked out like that. And then, the products that ARNOLD allows us to put out to the world, our crash information, our traveler information website that's out there. All of that depends on ARNOLD to make it run. And then one thing that's very near and dear to my heart is the map series that we still develop here at the department. So, right now on the screen, you guys are looking at one of our county maps. For many years, we were not putting the local road names on our county maps. It was the state highway system. The local roads were there, but just no names on them. maps were very detailed, have been for a long time, but having this additional asset on there with the local road names is tremendous. The public's been asking for it for many years. We have a lot of folks that I call them cemetery hunters. A lot of folks that are looking for their ancestry around the state. And it's a very important layer to have on there for them. We're very excited about this new series to be able to offer it, and 100% run by Arnold. Wow,
that's great. So it's a give back to the participants that brought the data to you in the first place. That's great.
Yeah,
kind of close that loop. Beautiful.
And some of the benefits that we've seen from that work, they almost seem sort of like no-brainers, but for whatever reason, originally in our statewide road centerline file standard, there was not a really good attribute column in there for simple cartography purposes. You could kind of reverse engineer it, but there was not a good way. If I just wanted to go into the data and I wanted to symbolize, this is a state highway, this is a county road, this is a city street, this is private, whatever. There was just not a easy way to do that. And, that was one of the things that was a key component that was built in to this data set. It sounds very elementary, but you don't realize how critical something like that can be unless you don't have it. And so that was like just one of the very simple, straightforward, and yet far-reaching and much used benefits of the work we did.
Okay. Any other final thoughts, takeaways, lessons? Insights.
I'd say one of the big things, and Sharon, you feel free to pick up what I leave out is Sharon mentioned I think early on that in some respects we had maybe sort of drifted away in our efforts toward maintenance. A lot of times in these types of projects, you're so laser focused when you're in the building phase. And you've got your laser focused, you've got resources poured into it, you've got a deadline, all those types of things, and you're really just blowing and going through it. And you create this wonderful product, and then you get to maintenance mode. Well, a lot of times the natural response there is maybe you back off the steam just a little bit. And, in some cases, naturally we did that. And theoretically, maintenance should be easier than construction. I mean, if you think about it, it's a slower pace, it's longer term, all those types of things. But really, and now, to me, what we really need to spend some time focusing on is, picking those reins back up where we may have loosened them just a little bit, picking those reins back up and sort of pulling the horse back over to where we needed to be going. Whereas the horse is not necessarily going totally the wrong direction now, but maybe the horse is not traveling its appointed path in the most efficient manner possible.
That's great. Oh, thank you. Sharon, any parting thoughts from you?
The one thing that I do want to say between this partnership with ARDOT and the AGISO office is that we got to learn each other's data and a little bit more about each other's purpose. I think it really helped out with this project. I certainly concur with what Jonathan just said about moving forward in a stronger sense, towards the maintenance of this data. And I think that as rules and regulations start coming out for Next Gen 911, we will certainly be doing that.
Okay, great. Brian, I don't want to overlook you. Any last thoughts here before we start taking questions from our group?
No, I think that was great from both Sharon and Jonathan. I guess my only parting response is, when do you think this dream will become the reality?
Who wants to answer that one?
Why don't you ask an easy question? Hey, good question. And I think that's that's to me, that's only limited by the amount of effort that, you know, Sharon and I throw into that, really. So how quickly that becomes a reality, hey, I'm not sure any of us can necessarily predict that, but it's kind of one of those things that Sharon and I can shorten whatever time frame that might be. You know, if we just sort of proverbially take that bull by the horns and you know, even if brute force is maybe sometimes necessary.
Well, I think the key takeaway there is really just the fact that you've formed this partnership to start working together and working towards that goal. And I think that's a really good first step. And as you guys move along, you learn what each is doing and how you can continue to support each other as well.
Yeah. Hey, I think we're going to ask Aaron to see what we got for questions in the queue. And while he's doing that, Jonathan, let me ask you real quickly, because you came up with this title. Tell me about that. How'd you come up with that title? And, you know, like, for example, were coffee shops one of the places you met these locals to try to sort this out?
If necessary, yeah. And various other places. You know, one of our, you know, it's cowboy boots, coffee shops, and gravel roads. Well, you know, I think one of those slides back through there made the point that when, you know, as far as our office, when we meet with these local folks, you know, we kind of meet them where they are. You know, in a lot of these rural counties, you know, the county judge or the road foreman or whoever that might be, they come to the office in jeans. You know, I'm not gonna show up in a tie and sit down and talk to someone that wears boots and jeans to his office daily. And, you know, it's, you know, you don't want to be constrained by those types of things either. You know, if that county judge in our case if he's got to be over here doing this or doing that, hey, I might be in the truck with him going to wherever he's going. You know, it's not, you know, you can't get into you can't get into a mold and expect that every place and person is going to respond to the same thing, so to speak.
Great. Aaron, have we got any questions coming in?
We do, Bill, and we have plenty of time here to answer your questions, so feel free to keep submitting them as we go along. I'm just going to review what's coming so far. We have our first one here, was asked a little earlier in the presentation. Did the local government, either county or city, provide the surface type, such as paved versus unpaved, without the DOT providing any incentives? So I guess he's asking, did you have to, you know, sweeten the deal a little bit for these folks to talk and participate, or what did that process look like for getting some of those attributes?
So I mean, I'll take the first stab at that one, because since it's geared toward local governments, and then that was kind of our sweet spot in the whole process. But the quick answer is no. You know, it was just, you know, our office has got a long history of, you know, working side by side and arm in arm with these local folks. And so, you know, it's not uncommon for, you know, say a county judge in Arkansas, once they're elected, to be there for 8, 10, 15, 20 years. So you've got some stability there. And, you know, once we get to know one of these folks, you know, we know them for a while. And, you know, we've approached this from the standpoint of, yeah, if you tell us, you know, what these surface types are, where the roads are, and things like that, you know, that we're gonna do this initial work for you, and then, you know, your responsibility is just going to be to maintain it. So, you know, when you take that burden off of the local folks, who, like I said, have got 5 or 6 other things they're doing, you know, that goes a really long way.
Sharon, anything to add to that?
I was just going to say, the state GIS office, Jonathan's office, in the very beginning did ask us, would there be any incentives to offer, before we started reaching out to the locals. And our answer at the time was no. Let's see what happens. And then, initially, or I guess we just didn't have to. It just never came up again. And I remember seeing stacks and stacks of paper maps, where the local government folks had gone through and highlighted all their roads in certain colors for paved versus unpaved. Just a great, teamwork effort. So wonderful to see, but no incentives.
Great. All right.
Let's see. Have a couple more coming in. This one's from Wayne. Were there any challenges you experienced to have two systems, both LRS and NG 911, in one single road geometry?
So Jonathan, if you don't mind, I'm just going to say right off the bat that, again, the dream in the beginning, right? But we realized here at the department a few years ago that there was just no way that we could, maintain the to and from addressing. It's something that we don't, pay attention to for our linear referencing system, on that side of things. So that's kind of how the Velcro has come apart just a little bit on that. Jonathan, do you have something to add?
Yeah, so, I mean, technically, the answer would be that no, we haven't necessarily experienced any challenges yet, because we're still in that transformative process or transformation process, so to speak, from going from a data set that's in and of itself designed to support linear referencing and essentially geocoding to a data set that supports the very specific applications of next generation 911. That's going to be something that is primarily going to be on our office, simply because the 911 is not in the wheelhouse of the DOT. The DOT has its other missions. However, the thing to keep in mind is that we still have this underlying data set that transcends all these different applications and specific uses. So, like Sharon said early on in this webinar, a road is a road is a road, and it's got we use a line to represent it. Now, that line can support a lot of different things, and that's exactly what we're doing. And it's, quite frankly, next generation 911 is the newest thing, the newest something with Velcro on it that we're sticking onto this data set, and in a manner of speaking.
Yeah, Jonathan, you used the term earlier, the local data editor, almost as a formal title, and I guess it has me wondering: are there designated local data editors for each county, and is there, like a division of responsibilities? Are there certain attributes that the GIS office maintains and certain attributes that are maintained at the DOT and certain other ones that are maintained by the local data editors? Maybe I'm kind of freewheeling here, but can you kind of lay out how these roles and responsibilities are sorted out in Arkansas?
So typically there would be someone, that's tasked, with that responsibility. And more times than not, it's that person might be maintaining road centerline data and address point data for that particular city or county. The catch is it might not always be in the same county office. In this county, it might be, someone in the 911 office. In this other county, it might be someone in the county assessor's office. In this other county, it might be someone in the emergency management office. So it just it moves around from place to place. And typically what those local folks are concerned with is, if they add a new road, for instance, well, we want them to, one, make sure that the road's drawn in the right place, is attributed correctly from the standpoint of the things that would support geocoding: the road name, the left and right address ranges. the city name, whatever. One of the things that our office typically would add on their behalf, so to speak. And if they know this, they can certainly put it in, but we have other means that we can add things like zip codes. Zip codes can be kind of a fuzzy thing sometimes. And we have processes that we can use that will pretty accurately assign those zip codes if they're not able to. And I can't remember. I was trying to remember back everything you just said because there was about 3 or 4 questions wrapped up in
of course.
You said there, and I'm not sure I answered all of them.
Well, I was asking about roles and responsibilities and how that sorts out, and you've been doing a good job answering that. I guess like a follow-up question on that would be, I assume that there's some centralized QA, quality assurance steps that your office and or Sharon's office takes on the data. Can you talk about that? Both of you maybe answer that.
And our QA/QC is going to be really geared around things like, okay, are there missing? Are there key attributes that are missing? Are there topological problems? Is there some road over here that's just kind of stranded out there with no apparent purpose? Those types of things. And then Sharon can obviously speak more about this, but when they get the data, they're really not looking as much at those types of things and more what is it supporting their application.
That kind of leads into David's question. He's asking, you have these updates coming from different sources, even considering construction and developers and telephone companies. How is the merging and the coordination of those merges taking place? I think is his question.
Sharon, I'm gonna let you start with that one.
Yeah. So I guess the part of that question that resonates with me is, the center lines. So when we do, send out the, hey, this highway changed, we don't necessarily want to trust what the locals are going to be modeling that highway. Are they going to digitize it themselves? What are they using for that? So we go ahead and use that extra step a lot to go ahead and send the digitized geometry out to them. So at least that kind of difference, hopefully will not get into the data if they're going to do it themselves. And then for the local roads, when they update, the Arkansas Centerline file, and we use those local road updates, we're using their digitized information. That's including their direction, all their attributes. And then we're adding in the linear referencing attributes that are needed, for here at the department.
And luckily, the 2 most dynamic parts of our road centerline data set would be the highways, because there's always construction occurring, somewhere in the state, and then primarily municipal streets. In Arkansas, county roads don't change that often. New county roads don't appear very often. But conversely, municipal streets, those pop up all the time, especially in areas with a lot of growth, new subdivisions, things like that. So we have some good pipelines for that type of information. I can't tell you the number of times Sharon may be able to tell you based on those thousands of archived emails she talks about earlier, but I can't tell you the number of times I've emailed Sharon, some of her folks over there, and said, hey, can you send me the line work for the new configuration of such and such intersection or such and such highway? Because what I want to do is pass that along to the local folks to give them a guide. I'm like, here, draw this like this. Or in some cases, I've sat down with that local folks, literally sat down right beside them and guided them through editing their data to match up with what the DOT has, because that's ultimately, when this is part of a state highway, we want the local data to look like the DOT data.
I just do want to be conscious of time here. I want to thank everyone who's staying on with us a little extra. I know a few people probably had to drop off, but we still have quite a few participants on the line, so I think if our hosts are happy to stay on, we can get through a couple more questions. But again, thank you to everyone who might have other places to be. So to move on to just a couple more, if that's okay with all of you, we had a quick comment this from Elizabeth. She says, born and raised in Northeast Arkansas in Greene County, and now she spent 16 years doing GIS in Missouri and still a proud Arkansan. So thanks, Elizabeth, for being here. That's a great story to hear.
Hey, Aaron, I think you missed the most important part of that comment. She had WSP in there, which means Woo Pig Suey.
Oh, yeah.
Go Razorbacks. Thank you,
Yes.
Elizabeth.
Razorback fans around the country. A couple more questions. We have one. How do we get a copy of today's recording? We will be sending that out to all of you, so rest assured you'll be able to review it back and play back your favorite moments or share it with your colleagues. Just a couple more questions to get through. How long did it take to meet these ARNOLD requirements? What did that timeline look like?
So memorandum in 2012 from FHWA. We started our official partnership with the state GIS office in April of 2014. And then we finished in December of 2017 and started going into maintenance mode. So, about almost 3 years, before we started entering maintenance mode with ARNOLD.
Quite the timeline. Any other thoughts on that, or should we move on to what it looks like is our last question for the day, unless something comes in the last minute here? All right. So lastly, we just have one last question. What are some ways the public can benefit from this data, and is it publicly published?
Jonathan, you want to start on that?
So the answer to the second of those questions is yes. The Arkansas GIS Office makes available nearly 400 different data sets from our website, which is gis.arkansas.gov, and this data set is one of them. And if you were to download it from our data set, you wouldn't find it on there called ARNOLD or LRS or something like that. You would find it on there as the Arkansas Centerline file or ACF for short. Excuse me. And Aaron, what was the first part of that question? I'm sorry.
Just some of the ways maybe that the public have used this data for different projects or for the greater good, so to speak.
And I would say and Sharon may have some other things, but one of the big benefits publicly, maybe it's a little bit indirectly, but there's over the last few years, there's been a lot of work done, at the county levels and at the state legislative level about how better ways to fund and cost share and things like that, maintenance of county roads, because simply put, there's just, you remember those mileage figures in the beginning of the presentation, they about how many local roads there were and how many state highways there were. There's a lot of those local roads, and so some local groups were able to use this data that really hadn't existed before to really dig into the data and get some of the answers they needed because they really needed good solid numbers on, okay, how many, early on we said there was this many local roads. Well, they needed to see, how many of those were municipal streets and how many of those were county roads and maybe how many of those were something else. And it really gets into, like so many other things, it drives a lot of that funding. And so that was a direct connection to be able to do something that they really had never been able to do before, or didn't have the geospatial data to support that, I guess I could say.
Excellent. Any other creative uses out there that you're aware of, Sharon?
Yeah, so Aaron, just real quick from my end, if you have a chance, go check out iDriveArkansas.com. That's our tourism or our traveler information website here at the department, totally Arnold driven. So your construction projects that you see out there, any kind of incidents that are mapped out there, anything from here's where the rest area is, living off of that linear referencing system. And then on ArcGIS Online, our applications that we have available here at the DOT, so average daily traffic, our crash dashboard that the public can go and look at, national highway system. Again, all of this is Arnold driven that's out there that you can see quickly.
Excellent. Great. So, we're well into the 11th inning here. I really appreciate you all staying on extra to get through all these questions and more importantly, joining us today. Any closing remarks from Bill, Brian, or before I hand it over to you guys to close it out?
Well, I just want to say thank you to both of you. I love you guys are just great storytellers for starters. It's just fun to listen to you. And as I think I mentioned earlier, I've just been an admirer of the Arkansas GIS program for a long time because you guys have just really figured out how to do a lot with a little. And I commend you for that. Hats off.
Thank you.
All right. Well, with that, we thank you for attending. And again, we'll be sending out a recording of today's session, and we look forward to having all of you back on future webinars. So thank you to our panelists and thank you to our audience, and have a great rest of your day.
Yeah, thank you.